It's a good time to have Larry Kudlow because I want to get him to weigh in on this IRS thing. Larry Kudlow's on the line right now. How are you, Larry?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Pretty good. So the IRS, so here's the deal. I mean, apparently the IRS for, a long time, with the knowledge of apparently senior officials at the IRS, they were out there sort of harassing anybody that had Tea Party or Patriot and anybody who seemed to be actually a political enemy of the President of the United States.
Indeed. I mean, this is an incredible story of corruption and lying. I mean, one of the things that we learned yesterday is that both of the IRS directors, right, the acting director Miller and then the former director Shulman, knew about these contacts, knew about the attacks on the Tea Party groups and the other conservative groups, and lied to Congress. They both denied it in congressional either mail or testimony. Also, we learned that the woman in charge of tax exempts, Lerner, she knew and she lied. So we have now a pack of lies, and so the corruption story deepens. And we also are learning that the IRS assault was really quite wide. I mean, it wasn't just Tea Party groups.
That's right.
Or Patriot groups. It actually was anybody talking about government spending or taxing or making America better or limiting the bureaucracy. And I saw reports yesterday that they also went after Israeli groups, which is a new spin. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, I don't either.
But these are, all these 501c4s. We also learned that it's not just a bunch of low-level hooples in Cincinnati.
No.
That it came from California and Washington, D.C.
And that senior officials in Washington, D.C. were well aware of what was going on. In fact, some people were told when they were actually being queried by the IRS, I'm just doing what Washington told me to do. I'm just asking the questions that Washington told me to ask.
And a number of memos were sent out. I think we're learning there was a circular in March of 2011, just a few months after the election. There was another circular a year later in the middle of 2012. No, that's right, March of 2011, and then a second circular that came out in June of 2012. You can't run these memos or circulars or whatever they call them without the top brass knowing about them. So really from the top down, you see this corruption. And I just want to add one point. I want to remind everybody that it's the IRS that is going to be executing and managing Obamacare.
Yeah, thank you. This is exactly where I wanted to go with this, Larry Kudlow. I mean, what are the larger ramifications here with regard to Obamacare and the other intrusions into Americans' lives?
See, remember that most of these groups that they were targeting were formed in opposition to Obamacare. Now, they were also formed in opposition to Obama's stimulus program and his tax threats and his overspending. Yes. But most of that had to do with Obamacare. And therefore, here's the agency now attacking these groups. The very reason that they began is what they're going to manage, Obamacare. And Obamacare itself will have so many opportunities for favoritism and political decisions and just generally, waivers, and labor is going to get this, or big business might get that in return for something. In other words, it's so political process, and it started early with attacks on these groups. So I think everybody has to rethink not only the role of the IRS regarding the tax-exempt groups, but the role of the IRS regarding Obamacare.
Larry Kudlow, you've been around for a while. You've witnessed a lot of presidential administrations in Washington, D.C. I mean, have you seen a week like this? Benghazi last week, the talking points memos revealed by ABC News' Jonathan Karl on Friday, and then you've got the IRS story, and now you've got this AP story with the Department of Justice.
I don't know all there is to know about the AP story. It broke late yesterday, but this is an astonishing story, and it breaks all the freedoms of press and freedoms of speech, and I just can't imagine the Justice Department signing off on this kind of story, and I think that Eric Holder's got a big problem. He may ultimately be forced to resign over this, but I think that story, as much as anything, reaches into the Oval Office. Holder, of course, is Obama's great friend, and one wonders whether he could have pulled this off without the consent of the president himself. I don't know that the president knows anything about the IRS scandals. I don't know that, okay? Yesterday he said it's an outrage if it's true. But gee whiz, this AP phone call thing, this to me has to go into the Oval Office.
Well, I wonder sometimes if they withhold, plausible deniability, all that kind of stuff. But we just had a guy on who used to work in the press office at the Justice Department who said there is no way that the Attorney General could not have known this was underway.
Right, I think that's probably exactly right. I mean, just my experience in the executive branch, in the Office of Management and Budget, and these kinds of memoranda, these kinds of actions must always come from the top cabinet officer. There's no question. However, I want to say that something as momentous as these AP phone call tapping, I don't think could possibly have happened without senior sign-off in the West Wing, and that would include quite possibly the president. So I think the president is in a very, very difficult position here, extremely difficult.
Here's what we know for sure. Larry Kudlow will have plenty to talk about today on the Kudlow Report, CNBC. We'll look for that, Larry. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry.